At a time when so many of us feel like our connections with people are distant and conversations surface level, really engaging with each other takes intention. I'm Ashley Gould, the founder of Attend, an everyday luxury home brand with products that set the table for meaningful spaces and gatherings. Our podcast builds on those spaces through dynamic discussions with open-hearted people, with the goal of sparking conversation around your table. In this series, we explore how designed spaces impact our lived experience and day-to-day life. Our aim is to help you understand what makes a space fulfilling and provide a scientific framework along with expert insights to help you create spaces that enhance your well-being. We delve into the entire spectrum of designed spaces, from our brain's relationship with aesthetics to finding the right designers, lighting systems, and objects that support your well-being. Ultimately, we examine how the spaces we inhabit can enrich our ability to be present and connect with others. Join us. Thank you both for joining me. I'm so excited to talk to you guys. I always like to start hearing a little bit about where you grew up and what kind of kid you were. Michael, do you want to lead us off?
I grew up in Salt Lake City. As a teenager, I moved to Oregon for 3 years and then came back and finished my youth in Salt Lake. Let's see what kind of kid I was. I was a bad kid.
What does that mean?
Well, I was the kid that on the playground when there were gangs, and well, we were in elementary school, so 4th and 5th grade, the gangs, right? At recess, okay, we're going to have a rumble or whatever. I was always the leader, so I didn't have to fight. I would just direct. Like, okay, I think you're going to take him, and or whatever. So, and the other thing was I was always into pets and dogs, and there was a big thing. The custodian at the elementary school, man, I'm bringing back something I wasn't thinking about, would always get stray dogs and keep them in the basement, because you shouldn't have dogs on the playground probably for kids. So I guess that was part of his job. So I was a big advocate of, we're going to sneak out of class and go and free the dogs and things like that.
Okay.
So I was kind of that kid.
And you still love
rebel.
Dogs.
Yeah, I still love dogs. Yeah. Bear's with us today.
And I would say I think you still have a bit of that rebellious streak. Would you agree with that?
Probably, yeah. I probably am not the best rule follower.
Okay. We'll get into that because that might be why you are so good at your job.
Maybe. Yeah.
We'll talk more about that.
Sure.
And Gage, so your father's sitting right next to you.
That's right. Yep.
So you might want to be careful with what you say, but he probably knows everything anyway.
No, I think I was a bad kid, I'll say. I think I was a pretty good kid. I grew up really around the architecture firm a lot. So it was the front room of our house was, kind of where you started it out. And so that was something that I know I was always around. But not, I guess, into the minutia of what it takes to run the firm or what it means to be an architect. It was more just the creative environment that produced and kind of the high energy.
Gage really did. He was, as he said, our office was in our home for a long time.
Okay.
So our kids grew up, and I swear they said they want to be anything but an architect. So it was
including you, Gage?
Including Gage.
That was my answer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was, but during that, speaking of rule breaking, I violated many child labor laws, so they all had to work, for us. Gage was the first employee where he would be, I'm going to say the Dalmatian footy pajamas would be there running blueprints.
Okay.
Which is a chemical process. They don't do that anymore, but there was ammonia involved in chemicals, and he would have to feed the paper through, and the papers were taller than him. So I was that kind of dad. But so he was the very first employee, and
Still the smell.
Yeah. So he did literally grow up around it, and it was really nice to have him come back. I think after high school, if I can speak a little bit about what I remember, he, like all of us, right? I think the hardest decision in the world is what am I going to do with the rest of my life, right? And I think we maybe find it every day a little bit more, like we're talking about a podcast now and things like that. So, but he was a kid that would, again, skip school. I'm telling you, that question was too, but I'm going to lay it out there.
Well, yeah.
Because he would be, same thing, instead of go to school, it's probably more challenging to skip school and play video games in the basement all day. And I would get upset more about the rap music than the video games. But thank God every day that he did that, because the software that we use, and now I'll segue over to you because I don't know what it is, but I know that the engine is video game based. So whatever college or university or PhD degree he could get for what we do, and because we're in a language of just fluid ideas and finding our way through the design process, to be able to have that three-dimensional visualization, that he came to work day one just, oh yeah, I speak this language. Wow.
Yeah.
And he took off, and it's been such a change for our firm.
And we're going to talk about that because I absolutely love the melding of your two skill sets. I think I think people will catch up, but I don't think that my observation is that they haven't quite yet. Right. So we'll definitely talk about that. Anything else about what you were like as a kid? Like, were you like to game?
I think I'm just very observant, I guess, as a kid. Yeah, it's funny. I would always be in and out of the office and around a lot of the people that we still work with today. But my relationship with them back then was always just like, hey guys, bye guys.
You were the kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Curious, observant.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Were you, or are you more introverted, do you think?
Yes. I think for sure. Yeah. No,
yeah.
That feels the best. I think I can be extroverted, you know. I think it's kind of it's like split personality, like type A, type B.
You can do both.
Like, you know,
you can do both.
Exactly.
But does it take energy for you? This is how I am. Like, I can definitely be extroverted, but it then I'm tired after.
Exactly.
That's how you are too.
Yeah, I think.
What about you?
Same.
You're the same.
Yeah, I think it's, for what we do, we're on all day, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to be present.
Yeah.
Being present is the most important thing, to be able to hear your client and understand your client, and there's listening, and actually just understanding who they are, right? Understanding the dynamic of the couple right away. Usually it's a husband and wife that come in who's really in charge. We always know who's really in charge. But just that, like you said, being present takes a different level of energy. And I think that mental energy is more exhausting even than physical.
100%.
You're done.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I'm done.
Yeah. You just want to be...
I have nothing left.
Yeah.
So.
With a very few people. And
exactly.
So I really like to hear about how you came to your profession. So how you came to architecture. Michael, I think that I don't know if it was your father or somebody else in your family. Yeah. Okay. So can you talk to us about that and how you find your path there, and then Gage, going from like, this is absolutely not what I want to do to this is what I want to do. I would love to hear that trajectory as well.
Well, it definitely drifts off of your story. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, I grew up, my dad was a builder.
Okay.
So he did construction, and right now he does tilt-up concrete walls and precast concrete. He's just a genius.
Okay.
And there's that fine line between genius and madman, right? So he's just... Right now, he has a foot over each side of that line. Usually it stays like that, or whatever. It veers suddenly to the left. He would draw his own plans at night, while as a family we would sit down with the 7 channels we would have on TV, right? And in the room next to us, he would be in there drawing the houses that he was building. So I think that's really where that root seed happened. And I loved that. I loved the tools of drawing. And this was in the old days, a T-square, right? And triangle. And I still use a lot of that stuff. But just seeing how you can draw lines. And I think I was really attracted to the straight line, which is weird because our architecture is very organic. But I loved drawing, but I was afraid I would not be able to support myself in drawing. So knowing that I had tools to help me draw that straight line, I thought, wow, I could do this, right? And so I think that seed kind of was planted there. And then I went through high school working for him, doing construction. I was a really crappy contractor. We would do these tall 30-foot concrete walls, and I was supposed to walk along them 8 inches wide and catch these trusses that they were lifting up on a crane and moving them down. It was like I hated it.
Okay.
I wasn't very good at it. And luckily I wasn't, because there was one day in particular where we were pouring concrete, and if you pour concrete in the summer, the heat they call it blowing up the slab, right? It sets too quickly, and then you would lose the slab. You have to jackhammer it out and start over again. So there's 7 or 8 of us guys sweating, finishing this slab, and I'm not doing a very good job. And I remember my dad came out. He was pissed. My dad's always pissed, but he came out and just like, get off my slab. Get here. And so he took me into the trailer, and I'm just freaking out. Oh, I'm going to get fired. Oh, no. He goes, look, I got to do your job. And I'm supposed to have these done by end of day. So see what I drew and try to draw the same thing right next to it, okay? And I was like, okay. So he leaves. I'm freaking out. I noticed that it's a lot cooler in there because there's air conditioning. And there's a window. And I'm seeing the guys just dying out there. I'm going, oh, okay. And there was a radio. So I turned on some music. And there was a coffee maker. And I suddenly found my place in construction. I want to be on this side of the pencil because I love, it gets in your blood.
Yeah.
The whole act of creation, it's different when you leave at the end of the day than when you showed up in the morning. Yeah. And that's so rewarding. But there's a skill set there. And I have so much respect for the people who do that. The people who build our homes is, my dad always said, never tell a man how to do his own job. So I've always taken that to heart. I listen. How would you do it? Right. I want to learn from the people that do it every single day. And I just thought I could do this part, right? Yeah. I could draw those straight lines with these tools.
So from that day, were you clear that this is what I want to do?
Kind of, yes.
Okay.
There's another part of the story.
Yeah.
So then I went to college, right? And I kind of was always drawing in the background, knowing kind of this is an option. And now in high school, I was really interested in drama and psychology, that part of it, more the mental side of it. Yeah. So I thought I would be a psychologist. And I was up at the U, and I walked out one day after a lecture, and I was just saying, I don't know if I want to spend my life listening to people's problems, right? Because I was identifying way too much with all of the things that they said they were experiencing. Yeah. I was like, oh, yeah, I do that too. Oh, no. And so when you walk out of the psychology department at the University of Utah, you walk right into the art and architecture department. And at that moment, it clicked. And I asked myself, what do I want to do? What is my favorite day? And I realized my favorite days are the days I'm inside, drawing, listening to the radio. It's raining outside. That's my perfect day. And I'm fortunate enough I get to do my perfect day every single day. Although
I would argue you also have the psychology because with all your clients, they probably are bringing their own what they're trying to work through in building a new home.
We find common ground through architecture a lot. Yeah. It's all therapy, though.
Yeah, for sure.
What you experienced, right? You had an idea and a vision and a list of things you wanted to achieve, and hopefully you enjoyed the process of discovering those, right? Because it was originally in the ether, right? It was just out here, and then we finally continued to make it more solid, and it began to take ground and take shape, and now you're able to walk through it, which is kind of a cool process.
It's extremely cool. We'll talk more about that too. But before we do, Gage.
My journey. Well, I wasn't pouring concrete, but I didn't want to be an architect or, that was the furthest thing from my mind. I think a lot of that was from, you were starting your own business. Yeah. So you were working all the time. I think that was noticeable, right? I guess you got to work from home. So it'd be always going to get you for dinner, right? Go get your dad, bring him to dinner. Sure. And so I think maybe that played a little bit of a role into it. And then also just inherently, I think there is kind of that counterculture that happens in any kind of parental relationship, right? Where you want to do
something different.
Do the opposite. Yeah. So for a long time, I didn't have an answer to what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to do architecture. And then, I went to high school, graduated high school, and that existential horror kicks in of what are you going to do with your life? Right. At the time, it wasn't too scary of a question because it was like, oh yeah, pro snowboarder. Easy choice.
Which you could have been.
I thought I was pretty good. I got all into it. I bought a trampoline. I was training, and I used to drive around this trampoline in my old Volkswagen bus and set it up. But one day I jumped off of it and I hurt my knee. I kind of tore my meniscus a little bit. And so I was sidelined, and you were like, hey, I got a desk job for you. Yeah. And I was like, okay, this is fine for now because I'm figuring out what I want to do, So there's no pressure really. And then, I'd sit down and they'd show me the programs, and kind of like you were saying earlier, it just kicked in. I was like, oh, this is like playing video games. And then it was kind of like, well, how fast can you draw it? Because you kind of bring that competitive nature into it. And then that naturally kind of just like spiraled from 2D drawings. And I always felt the same way. I loved art in high school, but I always felt like my friends were way better at drawing than I was. And then I get AutoCAD and I'm like, oh, I can draw straight lines. Yeah. I can draw the straightest lines, And so bringing that tool into the process, I think it kind of unlocked my abilities a little bit. At least it took some doubt away from, you can kind of do this. And then, that turned into, well, let me go to skill school. I'll go to the community college. And, we were all doing in CAD at the time, which is computer assisted drawing. And that's all two-dimensional. There's this other program, Revit, this building information model, kind of this new thing that was happening in the industry. We kind of heard whispers about it. Yeah. So I was like, well, I'll go learn about this. And I took a skill class at the college, and it was pretty clear, like, oh yeah, this is the way we should be going. It was all three-dimensional, which made it even more like playing video games at that point, right? So it's like, oh yeah, this is the path we should go. And then from there, it all kind of snowballed into where we are. I think I found my love for it along the way.
And how long ago when did you tear your meniscus and sort of start the desk job, so to speak?
Well, so I graduated high school in 2011, so it was probably like 2012.
Okay.
Just pretty soon after that.
So 12 years.
Yeah, so.
It turned from something you felt like you could do to something you love doing. Is that fair?
Yes, definitely. I think I found my my love for it along the way. Just, kind of being like, oh, the way my brain works, it's definitely way more shapes and colors and composition than numbers and letters and that sort of thing. So.
Well, I think it is so special and cool that you guys work together. And Michael, just for listeners, you still hand sketch every project. Is that correct? And then Gage, you work exclusively in the digital world.
That's right.
And I think this is such a beautiful pairing. Yeah. And I don't know how many people still hand sketch. Do you have any sense of that?
I think there's a few of us old guys out there, but I've watched the tool set that we need, those tools to help you draw, from pencils, because we used to draw on, it's called Mylar, which is plastic, right? Because it was a special lead for that. But gradually all of these specialized tools have become, they're just shrinking down to the leftovers that are left. So really what I spend my day on sketch paper. And just a regular old yellow pencil is sometimes what I'm using most of the time, because there's an eraser. And erasing is such a big part of the design process, right? So to be able to flip the pencil around and have that immediate fix is really... But I love the tangible connection. The brain to hand, I think it's the fastest way for an idea to get into the world, right? And so that part's amazing. And so from a firm that started with that, we quickly became, when Gage came on board, I feel like at the forefront of the technology firm, because I had no idea what they were asking for. I just said yes to everything. We should get this program. I would say yes, because I don't know.
Right.
Thank God I did, because quickly, man, as I'm still drawing which is what I want to do in my perfect day, I'm watching the business around me that I've built just take off through technology. And you can't beat that. When I was doing my internships and working for other architects, there was an old draftsman. He was old school. He would dip the pen in the ink, and there would be the small case letters. I mean, it was a real art, and I really learned from him. You spread the powder over it to let the ink dry. I mean, it was Game of Thrones stuff almost.
Yeah.
It was very cool. And he just kept saying, I have this nightmare every night that the computer is chasing me and it's going to catch me, because that was right at that beginning where the computers were coming into architecture.
Well, I hope that never happens.
I hope not either. There's a beauty to walk through a home that came from your hand.
I think the melding is the perfect solution or place to end up. So you have designed our home, which is almost done after years. And I remember, I'm not sure if you remember this, but when we had seen other houses that you had designed and loved them, we were just drawn to the architecture. So we were thinking about buying a piece of land, and you met us there, and we asked you, do you think you could design something for this piece of land?
Right.
And you said yes, and then we sat down and we talked about what we were looking for in terms of sort of practical things, like how many rooms do we want? What functionality do we want? How far do we want, our area from the kitchen when we have guests over, and things that we had kind of learned over the years. Right. And then we sort of said, now, like, we just like, it's almost a religious experience. Like, now we're giving it up, right? And now it's in your hands. I'm interested in two things. One, when you go home from a meeting like that, are you already thinking about the design, or can you talk to us a little bit about that creative process? And then also, do you work best with clients like us who are like, okay, here are sort of our table stakes. Now you go and do what you do best. Or does it also work if people have much more concrete ideas from an architectural perspective, what they're looking for?
Yeah, I'll do the last one first. I think that the more information, the better, right? Because what I'm really doing is helping you find your house. Yeah. And so, it doesn't mean I'm going to listen to everything, but at least the more I kind of let it all just wash over me, and then I forget it. But it's in there somewhere. And then when I go to ground to start drawing, the important things, I think, find its way through. And those important things sometimes show themselves because they actually relate to the property. But it really all starts with the land, right? Yeah. And when we were walking your property, it comes in a flash, and I don't know when it's going to happen, but while we're there, while boots are on the ground and we're looking at views and everything, there was a flash of the design, and it wasn't realized at all. It was just almost I don't want to be spiritual, but it was just the feeling of how it should go. And from there, I feel like I chase that feeling, right? I try to find it again, and I recognize parts as they come out. Yeah. And they're coming out to relate to the wishes that you asked me for your home, right? And for every client. So it's kind of a very cool process of discovery.
When do you spend the most time with the people you love? For us, it's at home, around the dinner table with family, or sipping cocktails in the living room with friends. So why not make that time even more meaningful by imbuing your gatherings with pieces that not only make connecting easier, but spark conversation around your table? Amaton's collection of small batch, artisan, quality-made pieces for tabletop and home are not only made for simple serving, they're works of art designed for daily use. Whether you're hosting a dinner party or sitting down for family game night, our collections create a sense of presence and peace in every home. Shop our collection of dinnerware, drinkware, serveware, and more at amatond.com. That's AMEATENDRE.com. Gather by Design.
Look, this is how you describe your process on your website. We stand at the cutting edge of mountain design by marrying the age-old tradition of hand sketching with the latest modeling technology to create timeless designs. We take great pride in turning each client's vision into a home where celebrations are marked and memories are made. And I think, and Gage, to bring you into this, from the very beginning, I think even probably before you started hand sketching, you guys are really focused on the views. And that is, I think, maybe unique. We're in Utah. We have these amazing mountains and views. We spoke with some other architects. I don't think other people do this or not the way you guys do. So you came out and hired somebody to take measurements and specifics about view corridors. And then, Gage, you use this to optimize the view corridors in the house, which I think is... I don't know if other people are doing this. I think they will catch up to it, but I think it is remarkable and really sets you apart. And we actually, when we were looking at builders, we went and looked at another house. The owner was telling us they had to completely redo part of the house because the view had been completely missed in the architectural drawing process. And I was like, well, Upwall's firm would never miss that. No. So can you talk a little bit, both of you, about the importance of nature and the view and how you sort of incorporate that into your creative process?
And I'll just do it quickly and I'll hand it off to you because it really does start with that view and that vector. I mean, a vector comes down to it's just it's an exact line. And to hear what you find most attractive about what drew you to the property, right? We're messing with God's creation. We need to take it very seriously. So if we're going to come in and create something on top of that to live with it, we need to realize the full potential of and like I said, the investment that you're making. So those, for my part, just become a single, again, it's a line. It's in a two-dimensional format for me. And I know that if I know how to bring that view, so it's not just in the general direction, but it's smack dab in the center of your window, where now that mountain peak becomes art.
Yeah.
Because we live up here in
Yeah.
a beautiful country of panoramic experiences. So if we can frame some of those panoramas and bring those into unique experiences as you move through the home, we're living with that art. Now that's the 2D side. That's the easy side. And I know Gage they've built software, so they've, go ahead. I mean, you brought the whole town, the whole mountains into the computer.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we live in a pretty great time where we do have information like Google Earth, right?
Yeah.
Where the whole world has been mapped, and we can take all of that big information, put it into the small computer, and kind of be able to reverse engineer the views and double check our decisions as we go, because we can double check, are we missing the view? We send our surveyor out, we get those views that are important to us, important to our clients, and then those become the constraints along with what we don't want to see, like you're saying, the neighbors. And those constraints become the ingredients to our creative process, where we make sure we're getting the view we want. We can just bring the mountains right into the computer and just make sure we're framing the view and just have a lot more certainty, I guess, up front about what we're doing as opposed to finding it later.
Yeah, exactly. In the old days, we were just a lot of this, so I'm pretty sure that's going to work. Right now, Gage can put flesh on the bones of what I'm laying out, right? And we can actually walk you through and see your property through the eyes of the house, right? And sometimes let's do a click, 2 clicks. Oh, that's too far. There we go. Now that feels right. And it has to feel right to you, and to be able to demonstrate that to the client. Also, sometimes we're looking up at a mountain. So if a roof line comes out too far, we've clipped the crown of the mountain off. We're just looking at the toes. And so that's very important too. And you see that a lot in homes. Or you see you look out their picture window to their neighbor's house. My job is to make sure that's not the only surprise you should have is, oh my God, this is better than I thought.
Right.
And that's what we do.
And Gage, you took us through, it was kind of like, it felt like a video game. So we would walk through the house.
We need to create avatars next.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there were always Easter eggs. Jared would put his name on like a Time magazine in my office. So I love that. You should keep doing that for sure. And also, like, where are the walls and how do we feel in this room? And I mean, these are things that are pretty remarkable. They were remarkable to us, and I think really special. So,
well, good. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it, because it really becomes a process of almost over engineering, right?
Yeah.
It's very laborious, because not only are we getting the view, but is the mullion of the window in the way. I think those kind of examples. So, but at the same time, we also are trying to get out of the way of what we started with, which is kind of, what God gave us, I guess, the land and everything. So kind of in a way trying to make it feel effortless and make it feel like what else could have been there without, being over laborious. At least when you look at it, it definitely can feel that way at the time. But yeah, it's fun to go through with the clients and show it to them, see their reaction. And sometimes they see things we don't, because we get so into it that they'll point out their favorite thing, which maybe it was unintentional or we planned it, but
we'll take credit for it.
We'll take credit for it.
Either way.
Of course, we meant to do that.
But yeah, just I guess the happy accidents, Bob Ross, along the way, where there's kind of the whole picture idea of the home, but as we go and we iron out the details, sometimes just the mechanics of it to work, we actually discover an item that becomes like the soul of the home almost, and that becomes, when you think about that project, that's almost what you think about is, those little things we discovered along the way.
So I started this series, which is really on like the brain and the built environment, with Professor Anjan Chatterjee. He's a neuroscientist and founding director of the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics. And he shared how his research has continuously demonstrated the importance of biophilic design, which is the concept that integrating natural elements into built environments can enhance human well-being. So I feel like you guys do this naturally, whether or not you were aware of this sort of like research and area of study. And I loved how he talked about an ideal building being a semi-permeable membrane. Yeah. So you're bringing nature in and you're bringing a little bit of the built environment out. So that can be done through lighting, when natural or not natural. So you guys do a lot of glass in your houses. fractal patterns, which you see in nature. And I would just like to hear if this is hearing about this. It probably feels intuitive, but is this an area of research you were aware of? Or was it just sort of, this is what feels right to sort of ensure that you're doing justice to the piece of land and what's being built on it?
Yeah, I think I would say it's just the inherent, our job is to connect with nature, right? Because we're designing in a natural environment. So all of these, the philosophies and like feng shui, I love the idea of going back and looking at it. Sometimes if you make a movie and then the people critique the movie, oh, I love how he pulled that thread through the line, and maybe wasn't really doing that, but it was just the natural flow of what the movie should do, right? I'm not doing a kit of parts to do that fractal patterns, natural light. I'm just doing wellness experience, right? Like if I'm going down a hallway, I would love to go toward the light, right? Because that's going to invite me down the hallway more than a dark wall. Some of these things, if you take into feng shui, over the centuries, they've created these wonderful stories that are connected to good design. But it's all just good design, right? I mean, we want a very lean design. I don't want to have fat. You can walk through some homes and there's just pockets of fat. And that changes the energy flow. There really is a flow of energy through the space, right? From your eyes going through to connecting to your flow of movement through the home. And the fractal patterns, I think those are all natural occurring realities in nature, right? And I just think they find their way into the design naturally. Mm-hmm. And so I really try to almost turn off the thinking side of the brain for a minute and just let the energy come out.
Yeah. No, it's definitely more inherent. I'd say we definitely have like our core values that we design around, right. But we're not loading the box with all these rules to get in the way. I think it is more of a natural process where we inherently understand bringing the outside in. It feels so great. And then you find out that there's a whole field of study on this. And,
yeah.
you know.
I love semi-permeable. That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, I love that feeling. Yeah. And maybe the fact that you sort of turn off your brain in a sense gets you to this biological place where we just want nature. Like humans just want nature. Yeah. Yeah. It makes us feel good. And so you're just bringing it in because it's biological.
How do you connect to that? I mean, it's the process, right? It's the environment that I'm drawing in, right? Like I said, there's natural light where I draw. I can see nature outside. There's music sometimes, right? And turning off the brain and just tapping into the world a little bit, right? I think it opens the door for those ideas to come through and present themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like your architectural voice is very distinct. Like we would go to properties and we could see that was an Upwall design. And I also know that your voice has evolved over time. Sure. I've seen some of your earlier houses and they are different than what you're doing now. So have you reflected on what drives these changes? Is it client input or a way to adapt to natural conditions or ongoing study? Neuroaesthetics also uses this concept of malleability, where aesthetic preferences are a combination of biological predispositions and cultural influences, and culture evolves over time. So maybe it's
that's the answer. Right
that's
there.
the answer.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, for so long, if you were designing and building in the mountains, and people thought, if I'm going to build a home in the mountains, it should feel like a cabin. And design guidelines in different neighborhoods built that same preconceived idea into their guidelines. So one thing that I think, because you're right, our style stood out quickly right from the start because it was different. And I think it's because the neighborhood that you grew up in, and it's a bungalow neighborhood, which is really, the bungalow is kind of an extension of the prairie style, which is that organic idea. You see these columns that, grow out of the ground and taper and, the rhythm of timbers. So I saw a connection of that language to the mountain language right away. So we called it mountain craftsman at the time, right? Which was really, and I think we really did drive that, and we saw a lot of, people follow that, right? I mean, which is great. But really what we're trying to do is get out of the way of the views and to connect to nature. And so the ideas like that, those preconceived ideas I'm bringing to that site, they're kind of working against the core idea. So really what I would describe our language now is modern organic. And the modern philosophy is just that. Get out of the way. be part of the site, be part of the place, right? And I think that also creates timelessness in the architecture, right? If you can be of the site. And I think we're very good at that. And what you do is very, very important to that, because you're designing the three-dimensional that lives as part of the hillside. But really it's the evolution of, and I think it's probably information, right? More people, the evolution of the demographic that are building in the mountains, they're seeing more ideas. Well, hey, I'd like to do this in the mountains. That would be great. And so, thank God. I've been waiting for you because I think I've always been that modern heart, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to suddenly have people come to us and ask for that. And ask to be able to, let's push outside that envelope, right? That envelope's a little small, and you see it all around. And then what happens is we work with these neighborhood guidelines where they're way out of date. I mean, they're really built from the 80s, 90s, and they've just been changed so we're still dealing with these out of date ideas of what it needs to be a mountain house. The creative process, a lot of times, like a lawyer, right? You're trying to find the gray area and say, well, what does that really mean?
Yeah. It
could also mean this. That's within the wording of your guideline. And then watching them try to react and plug those holes. So it's a little bit of it's not fun. That part's challenging and fun, and because it's all problem solving. That's creative. That's the creative process.
All new things have pushback.
Exactly.
There's going to be friction before people get comfortable. And that's sort of, I think, like the point where you guys like to play.
Yes. That's exactly.
I'd say there's that external input, right, where the demographics are changing, people's ideas are changing, and then also just kind of how our process has evolved too. I guess when you're in a specialized field, I think you're always exploring that entire field and the fringes of it. And so, we like those freakier designs, the things that really speak architecture to us. And, as the demographics evolve and people kind of want more of that, we can kind of input that through our filter of creativity and use our new tools, right? Now we can explore this all three-dimensionally.
Yes.
And we can actually look at some more complex geometry as well, and how that affects, how can that present itself in an organic way that still is respectful to the site and not doing something different for the sake of doing something different, but I think doing something beautiful for the sake of inspiring.
Fresh, right? We want to find a fresh expression of your ideas on this particular piece of ground. But you're correct about the technology as well. As when I started out, I was still 2D drawing everything by hand, all the details and everything. And so I was somewhat limited. And your visualization through a two-dimensional drawing is more limited than if I just say, Gage, go for it, right?
Yeah.
Now he's got the full universe of cones and geometric objects that he's bringing into this thing that doesn't look like a house at all, and then he kind of starts carving away, and you see the home evolve out of it. And your home is part of that too.
Are you, Gage, using AI? Or where does that fit into, do you think, the future of your practice?
Yeah, it's interesting because, like we were kind of saying how the tool of the straight edge helps you draw straight lines. I feel like the tool of a computer program really unlocked my ability to be creative and to be an artist. And, we've been working with those tools for so long where we already have a rhythm established on how we go through. But I definitely don't think we ignore new technologies as they come along.
I think we embrace them.
Yeah, definitely. We have a lot of guys in our office who are very tech savvy. So we're always interested in the new things that come up. But I guess in a way that doesn't get in the way of what your main process is, your main thing. So we've been watching a lot of that and play around with it on the fringes.
AI graphically still is two-dimensional. So what they're doing is just making paintings. So you could use that as like you're going through a magazine. You could just look at pictures, and the AI is generating those pictures. But translating that into a three-dimensional expression, and we've honestly tried. We've said, well, that's great. Let's try to draw that. That would be the direction. But it can't be. By the time you bring that into the set of parts and wishes that each client has, and the restraints and the challenges of the property, we're solving a three-dimensional puzzle, and AI is still painting two-dimensional ideas. At least currently. Someday it will.
I think it will.
Yeah.
It's catching up.
And I want to make sure I will retire that.
Well, no. So in my discussion with Professor Chatterjee, he talked about the future where he could put a virtual reality headset on somebody
Sure.
and show them like different colors of a room and then measure like their heart rate and how they're reacting to that color. And I could see, Gage, I could see you creating, and maybe you should do this as a side business, like creating a program, like a VR program where you're walking somebody through the house and they can sit in a chair and you can paint the wall a color and you could actually take like their heart rate information and see how they're reacting. And it could help you to design the optimal house for them. Because ultimately, I mean, what you're trying to do is create a space that is unique to a person or a couple or a family to optimize their well-being, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the same way that, we did with you, we took you through the house on a computer monitor, right? And you're able to kind of experience it. I think that's invaluable.
And we can do the goggles too. It's just sometimes that's helpful, but really we can get a lot out of it. Just the big wraparound screen that we're presenting on, right?
Yeah.
And you're in the space.
And at the end of the day, you're still just an eyeball floating in space, right? There is still, I think, a physical input that comes into play.
Like texture, is that what you mean? Like
exactly.
Materials.
Like when we do a mock-up of the materials and we can kind of first figure out if, is this actually working, right? This kind of color palette that we were imagining that we would work around. But
that color palette extends into tangible textural materials too. Like we're not just showing a blue wall, we're showing this stone.
Right.
And we're seeing your reaction. I can see she's not digging it. What if we warm that up a little bit? So now we're changing from the cool tones to the warmer tone, finding where your happy place is in there and then building upon that. So
I guess our whole process right now is so intertwined, right, between the old school and the new that I think we do have an eye on the future, and we definitely have no intention of being left behind as far as how that progresses. But also we don't want to leave behind I think some of our old traditions and processes that influence our whole identity as...
Hey, don't leave me behind, man.
No, I think we'll keep you.
I'll be in the back
We'll keep
seat.
you drawing.
Okay.
I mean, what a loss it would be to not have the hand sketching. I really, really feel that way. So I hope you never lose it, and I hope other architects don't lose it. And that new architects learn to do it.
Yeah, you're seeing it is a lost art. And I can see buildings that were designed by computers.
You can tell.
I can tell. Yeah. And it's just the dimensional, they're flatter, right? There's no soul. Well, not all buildings, right? But a lot of buildings have no soul, I think. And I think the soul comes from that human connection to the idea.
Yeah.
Giving the building humanity, and the closest thing you can do is, actually touch the pencil and, get some of that kind of natural expression, I guess, across.
It's an art. Architecture is an art. I don't want to lose that art part of it.
Yeah.
And I'm old enough that the art to me is still drawing, right?
Yeah.
So,
And we do these 3D models, but we still doodle on them to figure out where we're going, know? So it's a mix of both worlds, but
what they say, AI won't take your job, but the guy who knows how to use AI will take your job. So and I think keeping your eye on the new technologies, what's coming and how we can utilize that without it taking over, because that could very well become the same thing in the future too, where everything has the same look. You've seen AI renderings and stuff, and there's a look to them, right? And they're beautiful.
Yeah, for sure.
They're amazing.
But it's all about the input, right? Where's the AI getting its input from? Well, it's all the stuff that we've created already, but there's a certain point where it's going to be cannibalizing its own work, and so everything will kind of mellow out. And so I think being able to...
It still comes from your brain.
Bring your good taste along, and I think that natural creativity will always have a place in design, for sure.
Yeah.
So it would be cool if we could use AI to help us really expand our creations more, but we're seeing, we've dipped our toe into that. It's really very limiting, right? It's just, like I said, it's just no more than flipping through a magazine and getting ideas or finding ideas in nature. This is just another source of inspiration.
Yeah, it's no different than when a client sends us a picture that they found on Pinterest, and we take that information and it goes through our filter. What we end up creating, even if you try to redraw something, I think it still goes through the human filter, and a lot of times you just end up creating something completely different that might be inspired by that.
That's the goal, right? You don't want to create what you see. You want to forget what you see and then find it again.
Yeah, exactly. We want our creating to be easier, we don't want to stop creating.
Let's talk a little bit about functionality versus aesthetics. As we've gone along in the process, we had something here, but now we need this HVAC system. We have a pipe that you didn't know about, but that's kind of one example of sort of like this push-pull between aesthetics and the design you have in your head and functionality. I assume that happens all the time. Like, is there a big enough closet or room for a closet or things that, or storage? And so the architectural process pulls all the way through the building process.
Correct.
And Jared is amazing.
Yeah, he is.
Jared we're working with.
Very lucky.
And he comes on site and he looks at something. He's like, no. And you couldn't see it because it wasn't like that pipe wasn't in your rendering, right? Like there are realities of structural engineering and systems that the house requires that you can't foresee exactly where they will go. So can you talk a little bit about that balancing act from the beginning, like when you're first designing and then pulling it through to when you're actually building and things come up and it's sort of this constant like pivoting?
Yes. And pivoting is, we have to be great dancers, right? We have to be very nimble because you walk into a site where, you know, we're looking at the big picture, right? We want to make sure this works. It feels good from the inside, from a volume standpoint. It looks great on the outside. It holds up against all the elements, right? So architecture is high art. It sings and dances and acts. It does it all from the inside and the outside, right? But then you have to marry that through the lens of reality too, right? It's also a living creature. I really think it's an organic, machine, and that machine and that creature has blood vessels and it has breathing systems, and I mean and those things really. I'm not an expert in those, but again, the guy who does it every day is. So as they start to bring those realities into the design, being nimble, and I think being proficient enough that you can respond quickly. You can pivot, like you said. I can just go, oh, well, let's just do this, right? But that's still design. That's still creativity. We're problem solving through the whole experience. It just becomes more granular as you get into those distinct things. Oh, that's there. What do we do with it now? Well, we could do this, or or push back.
Well, that's where it's like, I feel like on the overall design, we knew we loved what we did. We gave that up to you. But on certain points of functionality, we were firm because we also know what our goals are for the house, for our extended family, et cetera. And so I think that's actually, it's really nice to know, like, this is where I'm not willing to compromise. And then there are lots of places I don't, you are the expert.
But it's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
A lot of architects are, it's not a conversation, it's a statement.
Right.
This is, I'm hearing you, but then I'm going to ask you to clarify. Then I'll ask you, are you sure?
Yeah.
Do you want to phone a friend? And then finally, okay, let's see how we can make that work, right? So,
yeah, it's funny because Professor Chatterjee said architects are among the smartest people that he knows, and often they forget that people are actually using the buildings that they design. And it's it's like it's such an art that it's a little too, I don't know what word I'm trying, the high of an art, perhaps.
But we really do focus on the human experience, right? I mean, that threads its way through the whole program as Gage is sculpting the inside and doing the renderings. There's always, and it's an avatar, right? But there is the looking at it from that 5-foot eye level, right? Instead of the optimum eye level that shows the space, right? To sell your idea, right? It's about that. How is that human experiencing? And as he's moving, they are moving through the space, right? The view through the window changes. Suddenly it's different. And we want to make sure that the human is experiencing the idea optimally. Right?
Yes.
And always thinking about that, the sense of touch, the tactile experience, right? That I love the semi-permeable idea, the breaking down that barrier, what's inside, what's outside. I can see the stone chimney through the glass, but now I can touch it.
Yeah.
So that did so many things in the human experience right there, right?
Yeah.
Out there it's snowing, and in here I have my slippers on.
Yeah.
And the fire is on, but I'm connected to nature.
Yeah.
It's a really cool thing to do.
Yeah. No, I think you guys are very good at doing that. I think some architects are not, because at the end of the day, that building stands as an edifice to them when it really should be an edifice to life fundamentally, right?
Well, and I think that's why the clients are so important, because when you can push back, like about, this is how it needs to function. And then, if we were left just in a room by ourselves, I'm sure, it would just become...
The hardest design anyone could give us is I don't care what it looks like. Just make it cool.
Yeah.
Here's a flat piece of land. There's really no views.
Yeah.
Just whatever number of bedrooms you think I should have, right?
Yeah.
What we're doing is constraints and challenges, creativity feeds off of those, right?
Yeah.
So I need something to react to
Yes.
respond against,
That makes
right?
sense, yeah.
Really, the design is just a series of those responses to a client's wishes and the challenges and opportunities of the property, right?
Yeah.
We want to see the view from the front door. Okay, well, that means we have to do some things to make sure that happens, but it's about that back to the human.
The client should be able to feel something when they enter the building, right? Like at the end of the day, it's a building for people, and it should
And recognize it
function
as
that
it's
way.
your house.
Yeah.
It's not my house. I always say I have no ego, and I really don't. I mean, I'm so honored to do what I get to do. But what makes it a success for me is when a client reacts positively to the experience, right?
So do you guys
I helped you find your home.
Yeah.
Find your home. Yeah.
do you get a lot of feedback? Like, so house is finished, the family moves in.
Yeah.
How often do you get feedback a year, 5 years later? And what kind of
Often.
feedback do you get? Like, what is the quality of that?
Yeah, often. And we're very good listeners. It's important for us to hear that, right?
Yeah.
You know what? It's great, but this one room is just too hot. Okay, well, let's break that down. Why was that room hot? How could we solve for that in the future? We're constantly trying to become better architects. And listening is a very big part of that. And you're the test case. You're in there. You're experiencing this. Nobody knows your home better than you. So if we can hear that directly from you, it's amazing. Yeah. And to hear how other people react to your home too.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people will, they decide they're going to move somewhere else. So suddenly that home is a commodity on the market.
Yeah.
How is it received, right? We're getting a lot of feedback. The closets are too small. You hear that all the time, right? So closets I'm working on that through
Most
therapy.
of the time.
That's a PTSD. But to hear that from other perspectives as well, too, I think that's a learning experience, too. Not just from the particular client that it's their home. Because sometimes we get a little blind when we're in our own home, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard for me to do my own design, to do a remodel, because I live in that space. But someone seeing it fresh from a different perspective, if I can learn from that, too, that's very beneficial. And all of that is learning.
Yeah.
We're not wasting any of it. It's all coming
course,
in, and we're building upon that so we become better the next time. Yeah.
Most of the time we hope it's good feedback that we're getting, and we hope that people like their homes. But the best feedback we get is always the one that has a little bit of constructive criticism that we can take along with us to the next design, because it is a practice at the end of the day, and we are trying to get better every single project.
Well, I think even the very positive feedback would be learning and helpful too. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
this is how I feel in this room, or the light, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So do you feel like you get granular feedback? Have you ever thought about sitting down and asking like clients to sit with you for like an
After.
hour and
Yeah.
ask them specific questions?
Yeah, that comes with a bottle of wine. And we'll do this later.
Okay.
Maybe in the evening.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay. I'll take notes.
First we have to move in.
Right.
Yeah. And then you'll have to let us know, like, what are
Don't
those
give us any
things?
feedback about that right now.
I will not give you anything.
It always takes longer
Yeah.
than you want it to be. But yeah, and I think with the positive feedback, to me, is the reward.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the cheese at the end of the maze.
yeah.
That's the good part. The other stuff is the useful part,
Yeah.
right? Because it's just affirming that we were right, we made the right choices, and it worked. The things that come back and say, I wish this was, those, like, you'll only see the problems in your home for a long time until you become part of it, right? I see them in every home. All I see is the mistakes, right? Which is hard to enjoy a house that way, but
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, you always see the mistakes and, how you want to get better. But I guess the missing ingredient, too, on the feedback is that, we usually don't end up living in these homes. And
Right.
so when you can come back after you've lived there, once your home is finished, you can come back to us and you can tell us what your favorite part is. And a lot of times it is something that we don't expect. And it's like,
interesting.
oh, okay, yeah,
And a lot of times homes are like children, right? You do your best and you send them into the world. And all those realities, right, that need to be a part of life. So, some homes we're more proud of. Some children we're more proud of. Others. He's my favorite.
there's no favorites.
You know your other children will listen to this. So.
No favorites.
I love them all in different ways, but just you see as a parent, you know this, right? You see how the world contributes to who you're.
For sure.
How does the reality contribute to how the house ends up?
For sure.
You send it out with a great deal of potential. I've done my best. You're pointed in the right direction. Now let's hope for the best.
Of course it makes sense because you're also working with clients who have their own perspectives on what they want, and that you may feel like you're sacrificing design sometimes. I'm sure you feel that sometimes.
The hardest lesson that when I first started, my very first home, I was so proud of it. And walking through it, and the client's in the kitchen, and I'm just so happy. And I see she's hanging seashell wallpaper in my kitchen. And my first reaction was, you can't do that to my house. I guess you can. Yeah. So you have to acknowledge that at the same time. It's your house.
Yeah.
And we can just give you as much momentum toward greatness as we can.
Carlos and I are pushing your envelope slightly, with our colors. So
I'm terrified and excited
on the interior. So yes, I'm going to be very interested in. I know how I'm going to feel because I figured it all out,
and that's all that matters, really.
But
we don't matter.
Though you matter. I hope to be pushing you outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly. We'll learn from that.
Yeah,
it's a collaborative effort.
Yes,
we're getting there together.
Exactly,
and we would get somewhere totally different apart, right? So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You might be surprised how much you like that shade of blue, right?
Ooh, just wait. Just you wait.
Can you edit out the twitches? I've had a problem with blue for so long, but I'm working on it, and I'm getting.
We won't let you in our kitchen. It's fine. It's all good.
I think I've had a preview of it. Yeah.
Okay.
And it looks amazing.
It does look amazing.
Yeah. See?
It does look amazing. I think sometimes
evolution of the architecture.
Yeah, and people are willing to sort of push in different areas, and I think color is one that Carlos and I are willing to push in, and I will be really interested in your feedback, and it won't offend me because I will love it. So,
for sure.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
That's the most important.
Yeah, exactly.
To where we get to the end of the bottle of wine, I'll give you more feedback.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Okay. Professor Chatterjee outlines 3 tenets of neuroaesthetics as fundamental principles that shape how humans perceive and respond to architectural and interior spaces. These are coherence, fascination, and what he calls hominess. Coherence is how easily people can understand and navigate a space. Fascination is the ability for the space to capture interest and attention. And hominess is the sense of warmth, comfort, and personal connection to a space. So he notes we don't want all of these in all of our spaces. Like at the DMV, we don't necessarily need hominess, right? At the airport, we definitely need coherence, but we might not need fascination. But in our home, we want all of these. And I feel like your work really does focus on all of these. But I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on them, and if you think that one is more important than another in your design and creative process.
Do you want to go?
Whenever
the word professor's involved, I'm going to let you take it.
So, I think it's kind of, there's different steps along the process when it comes to designing. And I think each one of those mediums presents a new opportunity to discover one of these realms, right? Like, I think when we're starting, it's a lot more about functionality, right? Like, how is the home going to function? Right. And, form follows function. That's one of the, the tenets of...
At least our philosophy.
Oh, totally. And so I think we start in that floor plan phase where we make sure that it is kind of operating and...
Easy to navigate.
Still flowing, right? I think you can kind of get, some of those other branches. But I think the pillars of our process definitely start kind of more in that functionality. And then from there, we can go to elevations. We can start expressing
the
it.
Fascination.
Yeah, exactly. The fascination, the form. We can express it in a different way. And then maybe we cut a section through it and we look at it horizontally, vertically. And all of a sudden, we can solve another problem and bring another aspect of the process into it. And so I think through these little steps, hopefully it's a holistic answer to all 3.
Yeah, right.
But I don't think we're ever operating with all 3 at the same time. I don't think we're starting with
but at the end,
this vision of the final product. I think it's kind of like they say when you make a movie, right? You make a movie 3 different times: when you write it, when you shoot it, when you edit it. And I think that same architecture is so much like film in that there's these different processes along the way where you might think you know what it's going to start out to be, and you might be more or less attached to that direction, but that changes as you, as you.
I think you guys start with fascination, personally, with the hand drawing of the sketching. Yeah. It's like this artistic vision, and you make sure that the coherence is there. And you probably are most focused, Gage, on the coherence.
Right.
But for me, and I think it's one of the reasons I love you guys, is I actually love starting with fascination because it is kind of like the soul in a sense.
Yeah. If I showed you some of the initial sketches for your home, right, you would say, what 3-year-old drew this, right? Because it is just colors and it's just, you know, it's cool art, and it starts from that level of this wow, cool, funky, modern art scribble thing, whatever it is, right? Multiple colors, just the feeling, and all I'm doing is trying to just pull different ideas through that, you know, that sketch.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of coherence just from a functional standpoint, because I believe part of our job as an architect is wayfinding, right? How do you, and just that immediate arrival when you see the home from the road, right? And as you approach it and you get out of your car, all of these different types of experiences, there should be, and again, inherent, we'll keep saying that word because it's not blatant, it's not written out for you in a sign to read. You just feel it. I just know where the front door is, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what's happening over here, but I bet that's a more private space over here, just because of the clues I'm seeing that are associated with that space. So we're almost introducing at least a subconscious wayfinding experience through the home before you even touch the front door.
Yeah.
And then when the front door opens, that's when I see that series of wows. It's like, well, actually, it should happen at the curb, too. I want to pull my car over. I want to go knock on your door and introduce myself.
Yeah.
But then, as you move through the space, these unveiling of experiences of wow and fascination, right? They all have to work together. That's one thing to say, but putting those to you and having you build that three-dimensional Lego set, right? All of these parts have to fit together, and how they transition from your living room to your kitchen, right? How does that transition, right? That's a volumetric study, right? And that's Gage. So,
and it's so interesting to hear you say that you think we start with fascination, you know, because I think from our perspective, maybe we are starting like, well, this is how the house works, right?
Yeah.
But for you to see the hand sketch and then wherever that mind takes you, kind of on this, you know, maybe it's a little bit more romantic of a presentation. And so interesting that maybe the different parties are approaching it at different times, right?
So many architects go right to CAD, and it just seems like a harsher, sharper, flatter experience, even if it's a three-dimensional sketch, right? Or even a floor plan in CAD is different, right? Because I'm using different tools. I'm using buttons instead of you know, erase. You know, that to me is a real connection to the human. Me.
Yeah.
I'm still in here. But then hominess, right? That's the other part. It's we're creating volumes. If you walk into some homes and they're too big, they're just too big. But some people say, I want a 25-foot ceiling. I just want one. I had one in Texas. I want a 25-foot ceiling. And that's where the pushbacks are. Are you sure? Well, let me show you what a 16-foot ceiling looks like, right? And how it captures all the views. 25 works if I'm right up against a mountain and I need that height to be able to see the peak. But then what do I do at that 25 feet? I want to bring it down and create intimacy with it as soon as possible, because we gravitate toward the more intimate spaces.
I'm even surprised a lot of times when I walk into, you know, once it has been framed and you can actually experience it, and it does feel a lot cozier, and I think that hominess, you know, like I'm trying to track that down, and I think the scale really comes into it, even if it's, you know.
Did you notice your home took different sizes during the process? Like the framing, it felt bigger.
Yeah.
When they drywalled it, it may have felt smaller.
Definitely.
Then when we paint it, it becomes big again.
Well, and then
it's
you
so
get
weird.
the materials in. It obviously dramatically, like the wood and the stone, it dramatically changes. And we can't wait. I can't wait.
Isn't it a great experience?
It is.
We're so lucky. We have the best job. We really do.
And people say, like, I can't believe it's gone on so long. And it really has. I mean, for us, it's a labor of love, which I'm sure is how you feel. I mean, it's your profession, but I think you also feel that way. But it has been a predominantly very, very good experience.
Good. That's great to hear.
So, Michael, you were saying you can tell if you see a building and it was not like a hand sketched.
I'm extremely critical of built spaces.
Okay. And do you feel it like viscerally?
I do.
Do you too?
Yeah, you just have to turn it off. Honestly.
I become angry.
Yeah.
Almost, right? It's just because God only made so much land, right? So to see someone screw it up, and it's screw it up in a permanent way, that you've lost the opportunity of what that could be, but also you've negatively impacted the other spaces around it. Because I mean, just like you're acting your life in front of, within your home, as a community, we're living around these choices and these decisions. So the poor ones contribute negatively, I think, to our experience as humans. Yeah. It's so important as architects. I mean, you look how we experience when we travel. We were talking about Italy, and if we look at cultures through their architecture, what did they leave behind? What will we leave behind? That's one of the reasons I became an architect. I wanted to leave something behind and hope it was positive contribution to the human experience, right? I don't feel like that happens in the built environment around us all the time. Sometimes it does, and it's wonderful, and I'm first to sing the praises, right? That's what we love to travel, because it's like, wow. And either they got it 300 years ago or they got it, today. Look at this cool building, right?
Yeah.
But it's cool. I think the built environment too. I think we grow up around all these buildings, so a lot of times it's almost an invisible world. You
don't see them,
but it controls so much of your life, and so it is kind of interesting. Once I started getting into architecture, right? It's like, whoa, I'm seeing all of these buildings for the first time almost. From that perspective, I think it's enhanced the way I experience the built environment, because I'm seeing this whole new world that I never really noticed before, even though it was in front of my face the whole time.
Yeah.
But then on the other end of it, I think it is when you're being critical of a building all day, every single day, you kind of just have to stop when you're trying to go home. And at the end of the day, I mean, you still notice it, but I think just being able to...
I can't turn it off.
Yeah.
It's like I see dead people, right? I see buildings, right? And when I started doing landscaping, the same thing happened to me with trees. For my whole life, trees were that background thing. But as soon as I could start to see the tree for itself, I love trees, and I have a tree problem. Just the beauty and the structure of each tree, that's... So it's funny when you start to see things, how it does change your relationship to the environment. Yeah. And I think hopefully we could learn more how to see our environment, and maybe we would put more effort into it. I think the design process, that should come into our education process way early and take a higher, it's so important.
Totally agree. And I think this is why what Professor Chatterjee in neuroaesthetics is so important. And, at the end of our conversation, he said, the one thing I would like people to take away is that this is not frivolous. This affects our mental well-being, our experience as humans. And I think it's easy to say, oh, it's aesthetics, it's not important, but it may be the most important. And, I always talk about going to DMV, which is I'm so depressed when I go to DMV, but it doesn't need to be that way. Why is it that way? Right? And it's this larger sort of public policy around design.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, right? I mean, the extra budget it would take to make that have hominess and fascination and coherence.
I think it's the lack of light.
Maybe it's in the budget too, utilize.
Or that's a result of strict function, right? Instead of function and form, right?
Can you each share a built space that has really impacted you, and in a positive way, and share why or what it was?
Yeah. I mean, I think anytime we step into a cathedral or, we love to travel, and we travel through architecture and food, but we can definitely relate over both. But I think anytime you step into a cathedral or something, even if you're not of that religion or a religious person in general, you can feel a spiritual experience. Whether it's that you're looking at the stonework and being like, wow, I can't believe they made this. They figured this out that many years ago. Right. Versus just the aura you feel in that place. I think those cultural buildings like that, especially with historical value, always have a fascination there for me.
I agree. I think cathedrals are a great example. But I also like how it's the human reaction to express their highest potential for their God, right? I mean, we want to get as close to God as possible and to show God that we're worthy of them. And to have that happen centuries ago without any of the technology we have, let alone not just drawing, but the actual building, right?
It's
humbling.
remarkable.
Yeah,
How did they build the dome of the Duomo? I mean, it's humbling and it's inspiring. So I think that would be it.
Yeah.
I also love museums, the modern side of it too, where it's just pure expression of art. And the museum is, it's also got a function of it too, that you would want to pull people through it naturally, that flow.
You have the coherence.
Yeah, and I'm inspired by those spaces.
Do you have a favorite
My
museum?
favorite building I've never seen, though, is probably the Sydney Opera House. So,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That needs to be on the list.
Write that down. Put another shrimp on the ball. We're going south.
Do you have a favorite museum, Michael?
I hate to say the Guggenheim just because that's one I studied, and I love the concept of how that is a result of the type of art that it was meant to present. It was meant to present photography, which is an art that you need to experience closer up. Mm-hmm. So then the width of the walking space, right? It's
Interesting.
just enough to let someone walk by you while
Yeah.
you're looking at the photograph.
Yeah.
And to start from the top and let gravity help just kind of naturally pull you down. And this natural spiral, when how water works, right? Naturally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a natural connection to, and so I probably that one, but just more for the way it works with its intended purpose.
Yeah, love it. I always like to ask the same 5 questions at the end of every episode. As we explore in my brand, Amatant, objects can hold a lot of meaning for us. They can tie us to the past, enable us to be more present in the here and now, or sometimes even take us into the future. Can you each share an object from your past? You could either have it or not have it. It could just live in your memory, and tell us why it's important to you.
My dad gave me a compass when I was probably in high school, right? And that's, as you know, that has a point on it and a pencil on the other side, so that's how you draw circles. So I still have that. Mm-hmm. To be able to pick that up and use it has a great meaning to me, and it also has a very important part of my work too.
Yeah, I mean, we always had those stepping stones at Hollywood with the
Japanese symbols for the seasons, right?
Yeah, and I remember always growing up around those and walking around them. And
that's cool. And those were made by my dad in the concrete business, right? They're the concrete stepping stones, and so that you're connected to those is kind of a cool.
Should make some more. We should
pull
call
through.
them up.
Yeah,
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Can you share a favorite tradition? It could be something you do as a family or anything at all, any tradition.
Yeah.
I mean, spaghetti omelet's probably the first thing.
We're Italian, so food is going to be a big part of these answers.
Wait, what is a spaghetti omelet?
It's an Easter tradition where it's a layered. Have you ever seen Big Night? Did you ever? Okay. Anyway, it's
I'll put it on my list.
A great
Okay.
scene at the end where they're just no talking. They're just making this, but it's a layered, almost like a frittata. But it's the carbs instead of potatoes or something would be it's noodles. So you put a layer of meat and then noodles and then cheese and then noodles and all these different layers, and it becomes a pretty thick thing, and then you pour the eggs over it, and then you have to flip it. So there's used to be this competition, and these old Italians, who could flip them without. So there's a great tradition there.
Now it's kind of evolved where it's a competition. We make our own and see who's got the best spaghetti omelet, and as long as there's spaghetti in there, it's
I have never heard of this. I'm going to look
And
this
it lasts
up.
for months in the fridge. It's a brick.
All right. That's fascinating. Okay.
So food would be traditions probably for both of us.
Yeah.
Right?
That's great. Do you guys like to entertain in your house?
That's a good
Do
question.
you live together?
Gage is actually my neighbor.
Okay.
I was lucky enough he bought the home next to me, so
and I used to entertain a lot.
and he used to entertain too much, I have to say. There was some
Dad would call up.
Yeah, exactly. But so I think, there's always like growing up and having,
parties.
parties with your friends or whatever. I think that's definitely tapered off a lot lately. But as I've been, doing my own home renovation, right, so I can understand how long things take. But I've kind of maybe wanted to explore maybe throwing more like adult parties and kind of showing off the space. So maybe there's more entertaining in my future
to come.
But,
okay, I love it.
Yeah, as of now, we're pretty.
And I think for me, my wife and I are very good at parties. So, and I can say that when we throw a party, it's an epic party. Like we talked about at the beginning, at the end of my day, I'm done. I have nothing left. I'm invited to a lot of parties and I never go. I'm just there all day in that capacity. I just kind of want to revert to more nothingness for a minute.
So when you're at your party, are you enjoying yourself?
I'm usually just seeing what's wrong and what needs to take care of. I'm facilitating the party, right? As you know, right? You're a hostess. That's what we do.
Designing a party is a whole subcategory of design.
Maybe
I enjoy it when it's over the next day.
A smaller gathering, like just a couple people.
I do enjoy that.
Okay. Do you guys have one or two top resources? They don't have to be about architecture. It could literally be like your favorite book or your favorite podcast or anything that you want to share with people.
Well, you just turned me on to that Rick Rubin podcast.
Oh, good. Yeah. I don't know. Have you heard Tetragrammaton?
Okay.
Yeah, check it out. Rick Rubin. He wrote the book about the art of design or the act of design.
The act of creativity. I think it is. Yeah. So that's a great book too. That's another resource.
Do you have a favorite book?
I love,
or a couple favorites?
Yeah, well, honestly, Ken Follett, The Pillars of the Earth. I don't know if you've heard of that book.
I've heard of it. I have not read it.
It's an amazing book, and it's about the building of a cathedral.
Okay, amazing.
But it goes through the history of what's happening in the town, the politics, the king and the sheriff and all of that. But at the same time, the central character is a builder. Mm-hmm. So that's probably one of my very favorite books.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say just Monkey Wrench Gang. I think everyone should read that book.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Last question. What do you do for yourself? Do you have a practice, a focus, a habit, or daily routine that contributes to your success or just your well-being?
Yeah, usually I find the deepest, darkest corner. And hide there, I think just going back to, being on all day and just kind of trying to turn it off. Yeah, I like a good recharge time.
Yeah.
Just taking it easy.
Solo, by
maybe
yourself.
A bike ride. I like riding bikes, So
we live in Oregon for half the time, so we're back and forth a lot. And what I've started to do is, and we're lucky enough, we're right on the beach, but walk the beach in bare feet in the waves and just be that connection with the rhythm of the world, the breathing and the sounds and the tactile experience. And sometimes it's really cold on your feet, but it's actually a really good way to connect.
Well, there's research behind that too, and
grounding.
Yeah. So you are actually.
I don't know about
inherent.
I'll have to.
I mean,
it's all inherent.
You just know it biologically. Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining me. It's been so fun. It's been,
pleasure.
I will just say, such a pleasure and an honor to work with you both and everybody in the firm.
Yeah, we have a great team.
You have a great team.
Yeah. Josh, Jared.
Thank you for coming today. It's so fun to talk to you both as father and son too. Yeah. And
what a gift to be able to work with your child every day in a creative capacity.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky.
If you enjoyed the show, please